The Nazgul are either incompetent or just plain overconfident. Let's talk about it. Hello everybody, welcome to Aude and Tulava, where we're walking our way through the Lord of the Rings a chapter at a time. Today we're on chapter 11, A Knife in the Dark. We clearly need to start with what we know about the Black Riders. What we've learned so far can lead us to believe they like to work quietly and don't really want to be discovered yet. We see that when Gildor and his elves come by, and they didn't just take hobbits and torture them into answering their questions. When the Black Riders are near, Frodo tends to react and start to move to put on the ring. We see that while he, Sam, and Pippin are tramping through the Shire, and we see it on top of Weathertop. Tolkien says this when the Black Riders appear on the Dell in Weathertop. Frodo was hardly less terrified than his companions. He was quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowed up in a sudden temptation to put on the ring. The desire to do this laid hold of him, and he could think of nothing else. He did not forget the barrow nor the message of Gandalf, but something seemed to be compelling him to disregard all warnings, and he longed to yield, not with the hope of escape or of doing anything, either good or bad. He simply felt that he must take the ring and put it on his finger. I'm not sure whether it's like telepathic command the riders can issue, but personally it's creepy. It may even just be the ring reacting to the presence of the Black Riders, like the aura of Sauron is on them or something, but anything that can issue commands or make Frodo do something against his will is pretty scary. Right on par with that is probably how their mere presence just causes almost uncontrollable fear. We see this really well in Crickhollow. The night deepened. There came the soft sound of horses led with stealth along the lane. Outside the gate they stopped, and 3 Black Riders entered, like shadows of night creeping across the ground. One went to the door, one to the corner of the house on either side. And there they stood, as still as the shadows of stone, while night went slowly on. The house and the quiet trees seemed to be waiting breathlessly. Lucky, Fatty Bulger had bolted as soon as he saw the shapes moving, but we do see him collapse at Thenir's house, nearly insensate, and I think he was only around them really for a little while. In the Dell on Weathertop, it's a bit of a different story. As the hobbits and Strider and Bill the Pony begin to get settled in the Dell, the hobbits start asking questions about the Black Riders. We'll talk more about those specifics in a minute. Then they start wanting a story told. Strider tells them of Beren and Luthien. Long was the way that fate them bore, o'er stony mountains cold and gray, through halls of iron and darkling door, and woods of nightshade marrowless. The sundering seas between them lay, and yet at last they met once more. And long ago they passed away in the forest singing sorrowless. That's just the last stanza, but I beg you, read the whole thing. It is amazing. Anyway, once Strider finishes his epic poem and then tells the rest of the story, and everyone seems to be in good cheer. Once the story ends, things happen pretty quickly. Inside of a page, we have Sam running back from outside the firelit, deathly afraid, and Frodo feels a cold dread creeping along his heart. And this is right after they see something on top of the hill next to them. Definitely, probably just a jutting rock. It seems like the Black Riders have been near them and around the Dell the entire time, waiting for the true darkness of night before attacking and letting their presence build up the fear and terror in their victims. However, probably to their chagrin, the story of Strider kept their fear back, it seems. Anyone who knows the story of Beren and Luthien would know what an amazing story it is. Strider is giving the hobbits hope. I mean, his name is Estel, after all. But once he finished, we see the fear build super quickly again. They get afraid quickly and a lot. That's a pretty strong power that the Black Riders have. Luckily, Strider was there to provide some Estel of his own. Right before the story, we learn a bit more about why the Black Riders were seemingly sniffing or smelling for the hobbits in the Shire. Strider responds to Merry's question with this: they themselves do not see the world of light as we do, but our shapes cast shadows in their minds, which only the noon sun destroys. In the power and in the dark they perceive many signs and forms that are hidden from us. Then they are most to be feared, and at all times they smell the blood of living things, desiring and hating it. Senses too, they are other than sight or smell. We can feel their presence. It troubled our hearts as soon as we came here, and before we saw them, they feel ours more keenly. Also, he added, and his voice sank to a whisper, the ring draws them. So they smell the blood of living creatures. Creepy. Probably a pretty handy thing to have when you're, searching for people. And I don't think it's like a shark or anything. They don't need like the blood to be spilled, like be in the water for them to sense it. I mean, they probably could smell that too, but it's more about sensing the life force of people. They're no longer alive the way they used to be, so it's easy to see why they would hate the blood of living things and desire it. We also learned they are super awesome in the dark, which is why they've been traveling in daylight since leaving Bree. And luckily for Sam, Frodo, and Pippin, since they started out at night when they left Hobbiton. And once the Black Riders start the attack on our little company, Tolkien gives us a description of them that I think would be particularly frightening to the hobbits. So black were they that they seemed like black holes in the deep shade behind them. Frodo thought that he heard a faint hiss as of venomous breath, and felt a thin, piercing chill. This brings back to mind the phrase Tom Bombadil used on the Barrow-wights, darker than darkness. Of course, combine the terrible fear they're already feeling with the memory of being stuck in the barrow, you can kind of start to imagine what the hobbits are feeling right now. As we talked about earlier, their presence essentially forces Frodo to put the ring on, giving us this chilling image and helping us understand the fear of Frodo. There were 5 tall figures, 2 standing on the lip of the dell, 3 advancing. In their white faces burned keen and merciless eyes. Under their mantles were long gray robes. Under their gray hairs were helms of silver. In their haggard hands they were swords of steel. Their eyes fell on him and pierced him as they rushed toward him. Desperate, he drew his own sword, and he seemed to him that it flickered red, as if it was a firebrand. 2 of the figures halted. The third was taller than the others. His hair was long and gleaming, and on his helm was a crown. In one hand he held a long sword, and in the other a knife. Both the knife and the hand that held it glowed with a pale light. He sprang forward and bore down on Frodo. And of course, once they bear down on him, one steps forward. We later learn it's the Witch King, and he goes to stab Frodo. We'll learn even later it was a Morgul blade the Black Rider was wielding was meant for Frodo's heart and could have put him under their control immediately. So they would have basically just been able to pick him right up and take him back to Sauron along with the ring. He would be their thrall. And since they're all servants of Sauron, he would be Sauron's thrall. Really frightening stuff and impressive weaponry. But I said they were incompetent. With the weapons they have at their disposal, how could that possibly be? Well, pretty easily it turns out. First off, there's a couple things we learned from the attack on Crick Hollow and the Prancing Pony. They can't communicate with each other telepathically, which is good. They don't take the time to do proper reconnaissance, and they use crap servants. So we know they can't communicate telepathically, at least not over more than maybe a few feet, simply because they attack at Crick Hollow the same night the hobbits are in the Prancing Pony. The Black Riders in Bree would have called the Shire attack off once they knew their quarry can go invisible, and when they felt the ring's presence, which I'm sure they did. They clearly don't do proper reconnaissance either. Like, bro, Fatty went out the back door. The back door. Okay, so you're like a semi-immortal being, literally twice as tall as these non-martial hobbits, and you think all 3 of you need to go in the front in case of what? Why did not one of them go around back? And they all enter the property count of 200 or something. Not that I don't like Fatty, but he never should have been able to escape the house. And they use crap servants. Casey Olson talks about this, makes a great point. The Black Riders most likely didn't enter into the Prancing Pony themselves. They want to be in the shadows. It's how they act, how they work. Plus the windows in the Hobbit's room were forced open. Why were the bolsters stabbed? Well, Black Riders don't seem to want to kill the Hobbits, at least not yet. We see that when Nob rescues Merry in the previous chapter. So they had the sketchy looking southerner creep in through the window and try to kidnap the Hobbits. And then, he flew into a rage when they found the bolsters. I highly doubt the Black Riders would be so emotional. But instead of servants just leaving back out the window, closing them up, they make a mess of everything and just kind of make a weird spectacle. Now, I'm going to talk about their recon a little bit more because I think it really hurt them here. I guess I shouldn't be too harsh on them for not realizing the resiliency of hobbits. No one but Gandalf really knew how awesome they are and how well they would resist the temptation of the ring. And even he was probably pretty surprised at times. But they should have figured out who Strider was. Seriously. Had they realized who he was, they could have played things a bit differently. Strider said his enemy was, had set traps for him before. So I would hope that Sauron knows roughly where he is and knows that he's learned in lore. So if, I were some creepy creature that relies on my creepy aura to make, short little hobbits scared so I can conquer them, I wouldn't want to let this guy tell epic Baird Luthien stories to bolster their spears for a few hours at the time when I'm actually at my strongest. And fire. They're weak against fire. They clearly know that. Strider clearly knows that. So why did they let them get settled and build a nice big fire? It's stupid and it's bad recon. Their tactics were even pretty bad once they did attack. Maybe someone who's actually skilled at warfare could jump in here in the comments, but there are 5 Black Riders and 5 Travelers. Even odds, even if 4 of the Travelers weren't hobbits and you had the creepy fear aura. But once you crest the lip of the dell, 2 halt and only 3 advance. Why? You should all bear down on the only one that you want to attack anyway, Frodo. You can just hem him in and basically separate him from the other 4. Okay, that's mistake number 1, tactic. Mistake number 2, though I guess it could just be reaction to unexpected danger, 2 of the advancing 3 pause when Frodo draws his sword. We learn much later those blades were made to specifically kill the Witch King. So maybe the two that paused were just startled? Okay, I can give them that, but still, a little recon would have let them know Frodo probably wasn't great with a sword, and they'd have no problem dealing with him. Now, Corey talks about how Frodo crying out, "O Elbereth, Gilthoniel," may have acted like kind of a spell against the Black Riders and caused the Witch King, who was advancing, to pause for a split second. I think even if that didn't happen, that cry did break some of the spell of the Black Riders and allowed him control over his own body again, which allowed him to strike out at the Witch King's foot. And that motion is probably what caused the Witch King to miss his thrust and only get Frodo's shoulder. But then their tactics are crap again, because they just retreat, waiting for the tip of the Morgul blade to do its work, get to Frodo's heart and subdue him to their will. Why not do a temporary retreat, keep your creepy fear aura on them all night and attack right before dawn again? They're down a person, Frodo's injured, and you just need to run in and grab them. Not to mention, why are there only 5 of them attacking the travelers? Well, because the Witch King sent 4 to go and follow Gandalf once he left after the fight a couple days before, which doesn't make sense for multiple reasons. This guy just fought off all 9 of you, but we only need to send 4 to get him. And if you had all 9 at Weathertop during the attack on the Hobbits and Strider, I have to think you would have won. That may just be hubris, but it's still faulty tactic. So I have a couple of theories as to why they're so bad at their job. One is their boss, Sauron, does not share enough information with them. He, has to keep things too close to the proverbial chest, and since he doesn't trust anyone, he won't share important details with his subordinates. Or maybe it's a case of the boss, wants the job done in an unrealistic time frame and with inadequate resources, so the job fails or gets done in a way that should work, but ends up not working, like the tip of the Morgul blade. And here's my full kind of actual conclusion, turning into headcanon for me. The Black Riders were all basically kings, right? Then they got rings and got more powerful and rich and were all, wraithified. I think they would not have been as successful as they were if they didn't have rings. I think the rings cowed the people around them and gave them power over people they wouldn't have had previously. I think they were crap rulers to begin with, basically. They made bad decisions all the time and used bad tactics, but they had their rings so they could dominate other men's minds and had access to sorcery they didn't have before, so they could just overpower people and conquer Arnor, for example. I think they were never competent, or at least maybe just barely hit that low rung competency. So what do you think about my conclusion? Let me know in the comments below. And I know we missed the poem on Gil-galad. Get subscribed to hear more about that poem in the future. And if you're interested in spending, 8 to 10 hours listening to Corey discuss just the situation on Weathertop and the tactics, check out the Exploring Lord of the Rings podcast. I'll link the pertinent episodes below, and check out Lord of the Rings video on the 9 Rings of Power for some extra information on this too. And until next time, Aude and Tulva, day shall come again.